Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's exciting to talk to folks about liberty. I get excited about it. Sean got excited about it too, didn't he? That son of a gun. He is a really amazing guy. It's been a privilege to get to know him a little bit. But I want to talk to you a little bit about liberty in the workplace. For those of you who may not know what right to work is, let me give you the rocket scientist definition of right to work. Because this is really complicated stuff, and only a certain people with an intellectual level very high can understand this. We believe that every worker must have the right to join a union, but no one should be forced. That's it. That's it. It's an awfully good thing that the organization that I ended up working with, and now for almost 28 years, has a mission that simple. And it's a mission that's so simple that it's fundamental to who we are as a country and who we are as a people. You know, in the grand experiment of individual freedom, we talk about individual rights and how we should protect individual rights. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution are about individual freedom and how we limit the power of government. Yet we have a government in the United States of America since 1935 that has allowed a private organization to force workers to pay them a fee in order to work. How fundamental is the ability to dispose of your property, your work, your labor as you see fit? We know it's fundamental. We know it's fundamental. And for years and years and years, in fact decades, people were unwilling to talk about this injustice in America's workplace. Right-to-work laws across the country are demagogued by the left and the progressive movement as somehow hurting workers. Well, I don't know, but if you can convince me that compelling someone to support a private organization will improve the lot of our country and our people, I may have to change my position on right to work. But it's going to be a stretch, ladies and gentlemen, because this is fundamentally a right about individual choice in America's workplace and really the core essence of liberty. Well, Sean talked about how you can make a difference, how one person with no training, don't believe that. That guy's, he's just an animal. I mean, he really is a guy. He's really good at what he does, and it's just humbling to watch him and do his thing and stand up for freedom and liberty and see the smile on his face all the time. I wouldn't quite say that he's a happy warrior, but he's a happy warrior. But the idea of can you make a difference, and can one person make a difference? Let me tell you a story of a woman by the name of Pam Harris. Pam Harris lives in a suburb of Chicago, and she has a developmentally disabled son by the name of Joshua. Joshua's 25 years old, and Pam is his personal care provider. She takes care of her son Joshua in her own home. Interestingly enough, in 2003, then Governor Rod Blagojevich signs an executive order in Illinois that allows the Service Employees International Union to potentially extract money from Pam Harris as a condition of taking care of her own child in her own home. The Illinois legislature follows up with a statute that says, yes, we can force Pam Harris to pay a fee to the union, a private organization, for the ability to take care of her own child in her own home. Pam Harris, one mom with 7 other mothers who called the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, somehow seemed to think this was just really not right. Not right. Of course it's not right. But the power of government catering to a special interest that was one of the primary contributors to Blagojevich's campaign used their power in the legislature to take away the liberty of Pam Harris and literally tens of thousands of other home health care providers in Illinois. Pam wouldn't stand and not fight back. She had the courage to contact the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. We filed a lawsuit on behalf of her and 7 other folks that were situated just like her. Susie Watts, one of our plaintiffs, of the 8 plaintiffs, was actually being forced to pay up almost $800 a year to take care of her own daughter in her own home. And the fundamental question was, why? Why is it that union officials from the Service Employees International Union can put themselves between a mother and their own child when it comes to care and governmental programs? We can argue about the governmental program fundamentally about whether or not that's right or wrong, but the notion that a private entity can inject themselves into this relationship and compel someone to pay a fee for taking care of their own child in their own home is really an outrage. Well, Pam Harris and the other plaintiffs came to us, and we went to court. And we went to federal court, and we lost. Some would think that would be the end of it. But not for Pam Harris and Susie Watts and the other plaintiffs in the case who had the courage to say, let's fight some more. And we took them to the United States Supreme Court. And we petitioned for certiorari, which is a Latin term. I don't know what it means, but I guess it means to be heard. And the Supreme Court, after what we understand was 7 conferences where the justices get in a room all by themselves, and they sit around and the Chief Justice says, who wants to take this case? And if you get 4 justices to raise their hand, you get an argument in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. There are at least 10,000 petitions that go to the court each term. And they argue somewhere in the area of 85 to 100 cases each year where they hear oral arguments and make decisions. And you hear about some of those cases anyway. And we believe it went to 7 conferences, which is really unprecedented. They asked the state of Illinois to brief the case because heretofore the state wasn't interested in pursuing the case for certain reasons. They asked the federal government to brief the case because the federal government had an interest because the money that was being extracted was federal Medicaid money that was going to the state. And after these 7 conferences, they finally decided to have an oral argument in the case. Pam Harris was going to get her day in front of the highest court in the land. On January 21st of this year, Pam and Sue, well, Pam couldn't be there because she's taking care of her son Joshua in her home. But Susie Watts, another one of our plaintiffs, came to the highest court in the land, and they sat in the audience as a foundation attorney argued this simple case in front of the 9 justices of the court. And on June 30th, for about 12 minutes, you probably heard about the Harris v. Quinn case. It was 12 minutes later that they issued the Hobby Lobby case, which sucked all the oxygen out of the room, so you may not have heard about Harris v. Quinn. But that day, Pam Harris and the 7 other plaintiffs in the case took their voices, they redressed their government and were able to get to the highest court in the land to talk about individual freedom and liberty. If that's not an encouragement to all of us to continue to fight, if that's not an encouragement to all of us to stand up and believe that if we take action, if we'll invest some of our time, talent, and in some cases treasure in these battles to promote liberty and to fight for liberty and defend for liberty, if we can just do that, like Pam did and the other plaintiffs in this case, then we should be encouraged that we can actually make a difference in America. I believe that. Taking on organized labor in this country has been a difficult battle. There's no question about it. They have power out of all proportion to their numbers. To think that in 26 states in America right now that a worker can be fired not because he's a good worker or a bad worker, a white worker or a black worker, simply because he fails to tender fees to a private organization for the privilege of working. Gallup, the polling agency, did a poll before Labor Day about this. We don't know who commissioned it. But what they found that was over 80% of Americans believe it's wrong to force a worker to pay dues or fees to the private organization for the privilege of working. Well, what we know and what you'll learn in these one-day training sessions is that being right is not enough. Sometimes we as activists think that because our position is pure, we call it the Sir Galahad theory, because we are right and noble, we will win. Well, being right and noble helps. Trust me on that. I'd rather be right and noble than wrong and dishonest. But being right and noble helps. But what we have to do is first we have to have the courage to fight like Pam Harris. We have to have the techniques to fight, which we're learning from FACL and other organizations that are doing training across the country, and understand how this process works. And as Sean mentioned and the others on the panel, they can make a difference. When they first started, they never thought they could. When Pam Harris came to us, she had her hands thrown up in the air saying, what are we going to do about this? Well, with her courage and our technical and legal expertise, we were able to take that one citizen from start to the highest court in the land to victory. Sure, you can clap about that. Thank you. To think, ladies and gentlemen, that going back to the Roosevelt-era New Deal in 1935, that the government could have a policy enforcing this compulsion in America's workplaces is a bit surprising. To think that all these years later we still have to fight for this basic freedom could be discouraging. But let me encourage you once more. The 24th right to work state in America, does anyone know who that was? If Tony DeMott's here, I know he knows who it was. What was the 24th right to work state in America? Michigan, that's right. And I would tell you this, let me propose this, that if Michigan can pass a right to work law, freeing workers in that state from being forced and compelled to pay a fee to a private organization for the privilege of working, then the projects that we're working on, that you're working on, they're all possible. They're all possible. It comes with hard work, dedication, and an understanding of what it takes to win in this process. Our founding fathers gave us a great, great mechanism for redressing our government. It is we the people. Thomas Jefferson talked about us being educated. I know that you are. I don't take that for granted that the folks of you in this room that spend time here learning and interacting with others and networking have made that commitment to be informed and to understand who we are and what we are as a country. But oftentimes, when we look in the mirror, we can complain about government, but ladies and gentlemen, government is us. It is we the people. And as we complain about things that happen, we need not do anything else but look in the mirror and question ourselves about how we're going to make the difference. I would suggest to you, and obviously I work at National Right to Work, and it's been a great privilege to do that. I would suggest to you the issue of compulsory unionism that allows union officials to collect something north of $11 billion a year from workers who would lose their job if they did not pay in most instances is a fundamental essence of our fight for liberty. That money gets funneled back into political campaigns. It supports candidates that give union officials more power to force more workers to pay dues, which allows them to have more political power, and it's just a vicious, vicious cycle. You will find most likely that the issues that you're dealing with on an issue-by-issue basis, organized labor, at least the union officials, the highest level of the union movement, are probably on the other side when it comes to many of the issues that you and I fight for and believe in. That doesn't mean the rank and file are not on our side. They are, ladies and gentlemen. And we should never, never, never allow ourselves to say that workers that are union members are somehow on the other side. They are not. About a third of the members of the National Right to Work Committee have either been in a union, currently in a union, or retired from a union, or have some brush with a union official back in their history. And they see the injustice of compulsion. And they join with other like-minded individuals in the country to fight for freedom in America's workplace. I hope that all of you will join that fight. I know each of us have our issues that take our time and our talent and our treasure, and we're focused on those issues. That's important. But understand that the basic freedoms that we enjoy, First Amendment, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, how is it that we can defend the freedom of association and not recognize the contrary right that must exist if the fundamental right is to be protected, and that is the right not to associate? Yet in labor policy in America, we assume that we can compel you to associate with a private organization you want nothing to do with. I'm encouraged by our fight. I'm encouraged that ultimately we're going to win this fight. And the reason why I'm encouraged is because we got some great news just in the last couple of weeks. Gary Castile, who's the United Auto Workers' chief organizer in the South, he was the guy that was running the organizing drive at the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga, if some of you remember that story or followed that story. Gary Castile was asked about right to work. He said, I don't know why union officials and others are so opposed to right to work. I enjoy organizing in right to work states. It makes our case stronger. That's UAW union official Gary Castile talking. Union officials use this fundamental argument that saying somehow we're forced to represent all workers and therefore they need to pay us for these services we provide. I mean, we can unpack that statement, and it would take just about 2 seconds to do that and see the injustice of that. But let me tell you what the union officials are now doing about that. Their fundamental argument that they're forced to represent workers gives them the ability to say we must have fees and provides the platform for compulsory fees in America. Gary Castile and the folks at UAW down in Chattanooga, Tennessee are going to do, guess what? They just announced the other day they're going to represent only those workers that want to join them. What a novel concept. They would say that they used to say it was illegal under the law for them to do this. That's not true. That's a lie. I was surrounded by 11 LIUNA guys one day at a press conference, and I showed them a brief that was filed by one of their union officials, not theirs, but the United Steelworkers, saying that they believed they had the right to represent members only. Anybody who would join them voluntarily, they could represent. And the organizer, the leader of this group, kept pointing at me and saying, that's a theory, that's a theory, that's a theory. Well, the UAW removed the theory and made a practical application of it, and they're going to represent those workers that want their representation. What do you think is going to happen in that union? They're going to be really accountable to what the workers want, because now they've got to sell a product. Right to work laws protect that fundamental right of individual workers, and we believe that holding union officials accountable, making rank and file workers able to say, I don't like what you're doing, I like what you're doing, is a fundamental basis for strengthening the union movement in America. When you rely on compulsion, you operate completely differently. If I was convinced that I could get $50 from each of you every month, or if you didn't pay me, we could have you fired or worse or whatever, there'd be no incentive for me to provide service to you. I would sit back, take the money in, and I would go play politics in Washington, D.C., or Lansing, Michigan, or Indianapolis, Indiana, because my power was resident there. Their power shouldn't be resident in government. We recognize that, we that fight for liberty. Power should be recognized in the individual. And that's what we at Right to Work do. I would encourage you to join our fight. Thank you for the opportunity and for the indulgence. It's my pleasure to be with you.